Wait, what? If we care about anti-Semitism, and I know we do, we need to stay away from Bassem Yousef. Please don't give more ammunition by having a genuinely anti-Semitic person on stream. He parrots conspiracies about Jewish media control and the libel against Leo Frank. Wait, what? Really? Bassem Yousef is like a liberal, dude. I thought Bassem... What? I am completely unaware of this if he's done stuff like that. I didn't personally like how much he was like joking around with Dan Bilzerian, who I do think is like an actual anti-Semite. But I don't think Bassem Yousef is I'd be shocked. Yeah, I think like the shit that he does, the shit that he on Theo Von, he talked about Jews owning the media, and then on Twitter about Leo Frank stuff. Wait, what the? I did not know this at all, chatter. Holy shit. He retweeted one thing that was bad. What is this? After a Leo Frank rant that recycled anti-Semitic tropes and sounded almost like Candace Owens, who's gone deep into the anti-Semitic territory. I hope that Mehdi Hasan is the tail remove Bassem Yousef from a list of affiliated contributors. What is this? Tomorrow marks 109 years since Leo Frank was lynched by a hate-filled mob in Georgia. Wait, what? Wait, I don't know. I don't know enough about this. I don't know. I have no idea what the this is. Isn't this like the inception of the Leo Frank lynch mob story? Judge for yourself.
The American media are running with the lies.
But a lot of American media is...
If you say that would be anti-Semitic, so I'm not going to go there. Right?
Oh, is that anti-Semitic?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's playing a little close. He's playing a little fast and loose there for my taste. But I think he's just trying to be a comedian. But I do think this is...
They're telling me everything that I say now is anti-Semitic.
I didn't know that.
But I'm saying that even the Jewish people in Israel telling you these are lies.
Well, my Jewish friends who... They say that the media is mostly run by Jewish folks. I don't think that's...
It is.
They told me that.
It is. All of the corporates...
This is... Yeah, no, this is... I don't agree with this at all. I don't agree with Theo Von saying that. And I've heard Theo Von say this before, and I have criticized it as well. I think this is like super old school. It's probably one of the most... It's one of the most like insidious forms of it too. And I think this, like, whether intentionally or unintentionally, doesn't matter, absolutely leans into... Norm Finkelstein said this also. Yeah, well, Norm Finkelstein is literally the son of Holocaust survivors. And he is, a Jewish man. It's also... My position on this has always been, one, Jews are not monolithic, okay? Like, it doesn't matter. This is the idea that, like, there are Jewish people in media, and that therefore this somehow feeds into the pro-Israel position is so ridiculous, especially because guess who I have on my show all the time? Jews in media. Okay, some of the most like aggressive anti-Zionists out there are the very same Jewish people that work in media that I have on my stream. It's ridiculous. I don't think that this is like appropriate. I don't agree with it. I don't like this at all. Maybe not give Ethan and D-Bag ammunition. No, I'm openly calling this shit out.
All the CEOs are, but that's a different. But I don't want to go into their intention. I'm just giving you a case that it didn't have.
Say that though.
Well, according to a bill that was passed by the Congress 2 months ago, there's now an anti-Semitic bill that any criticism to Israel will be counted as anti-Semitic. Any criticism to Jewish people who might have a dual loyalty to Israel and America, if you attack them, that will be called anti-Semitic. If you talk about AIPAC controlling the elections and giving money, that's anti-Semitic. And it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, this is way too close to like. It's way too close to it's just like he's talking about dual loyalty and shit. Like this is not something that I've ever personally agreed with. I don't give it any room to breathe whatsoever, and I think it's a very dangerous. The Jews that occupy leadership positions in media have those jobs because they're right-wing capitalists, not because they're Jewish. Exactly. Let's bring back my favorite anti-Semite destroyer, okay? Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, who talks very famously about the enmity caused against Jews in Tsarist Russia. His speech is important to remember because it is prescient even now. It's something that I have brought forward many times over. All of this enmity is a simple distraction. It is hatred that those, which by the way, I did talk about at the Oxford Union speech as well. Enmity towards Jews is an old trick by those in positions of power even before capitalism existed, even before the Industrial Revolution. It is utilized as a simple mechanism of distraction. Okay? Anti-Semitism means spreading enmity towards the Jews. When the accursed Tsarist monarchy was living its last days, it tried to incite ignorant workers and peasants against the Jews. The Tsarist police, in alliance with the landowners and the capitalists, organized pogroms against the Jews. The hate of the workers and the peasants. The landowners and capitalists tried to divert against the Jews. In other countries, too, we often see the capitalists fomenting hatred against the Jews. In order to blind the workers, to divert their attention from the real enemy of the working people, capital. Hatred towards the Jews persists only in those countries where slavery to the landowners and capitalists created abysmal ignorance among the workers and the peasants. Only the most ignorant and downtrodden people can believe the lies and slander that are spread about the Jews. This is survival of ancient feudal times, when the priests burned heretics at the stake, when the peasants lived in slavery, and when the people were crushed and inarticulate. This ancient feudal ignorance is passing away. The eyes of the people are being opened. It is not the Jews who are enemies of the working people. The enemies of the working people are the capitalists of all countries. Among the Jews, there are working people and they form the majority. They are our brothers who, like us, are oppressed by capital. They are our comrades in the struggle for socialism. Among the Jews, there are kulaks, exploiters, and capitalists, just as there are among the Russians and among the people of all nations. The capitalists strive to sow and foment hatred between workers of different faiths, different nations, and different races. Those who do not work are kept in power by the power and strength of capital. Rich Jews, like rich Russians and the rich in all countries, are in alliance to oppress, crush, rob, and disunite the workers. Shame on accursed Tsarism, which tortured and persecuted the Jews. Shame on those who foment hatred towards the Jews, who foment hatred towards other nations. Long live the fraternal trust and fighting alliance of the workers of all nations in the struggle to overthrow capital. Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. There is perhaps no more concise and prescient statement on the unnecessary division that is very successfully created for people who must be united in one cause, that people who have the exact same class positions and the exact same struggles and the exact same wants and needs. It's simply one of the oldest forms of bigotry. And the reality of the matter is, it is a very successful method. I do not agree with it. I think it's untrue, first and foremost. I think that's the simplest way to put it, right? I don't agree when people say like, nah, you don't understand. This is how Jews are. It's like, no, they're not. There is no singular group that is monolithic, okay? It does not exist. That's not a real concept, okay? That is mystical thinking. That is idealistic thinking. That is good, bad dynamics. I do not traffic in these conspiracies, and I do not believe in these arguments, because that's not how human beings are, okay? It is immaterial and unproductive, and created as a mechanism of distraction. And I think a lot of people fall into these fallacies because of their liberalism, okay? Liberalism causes people to think in good, bad dynamics. Okay? Liberalism causes people to think in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And when you think that way, you always have to find an enemy. Okay? Someone has to be doing things, pulling the strings, because you refuse to see that those who are openly pulling the strings in broad daylight and engaging in class collaboration are those in positions of power, the capital owners, a consortium, a network of capital owners who are in positions of power all around the globe, regardless of their background. And they do this because they've designed society in a way that suits the profit motive. They do this in a way to ensure that they still end up reinforcing the structures that bind us. Okay? Let's see what Noam Chomsky had to say about this.
A little bit different. For one thing, there's two questions. There's a number of questions to ask about the book, I'm sure.
Lenin died 25 before Israel. We live in a different world today. It don't matter. If you think Lenin's analysis in that regard is not applicable, when in fact the time when he was alive was infinitely more susceptible to anti-Semitic ways of thinking. He's talking about World War I with respect to capital owners causing division amongst nations. So even if you were to talk about this from the framework of Israel alone, right? Lenin would understand that there are workers who are also united in their class struggle against capitalists, even in a nation state such as Israel. Anyway, Leo Frank was a Jewish man who was lynched because he was wrongfully convicted for the murder of teenager Mary Fagan. Jury believed the black man's testimony to Jim Conley over Frank's. A witness averred on his deathbed that he saw Jim Conley kill Fagan. Leo Frank is used as a dog whistle for Jewish people doing crimes of pedophilia and killing children, saying Frank is guilty today. He's literally just dog whistling. Yeah, I didn't know that. Sorry. I mean, I don't know the full details of the Leo Frank story. I know that it was like the pivotal reason why the ADL began.
One thing has to do with the quality of their claims. The other is about its reception. Notice that I think it is well received. And I think the reason is it exculpates the U.S. government. It says, look, we're fine. But what can we do? There's this powerful Jewish lobby that's controlling us. So we'd be delighted to be benevolent and,
Dude, banger. Straight up. It abdicates responsibility away from America, American capitalists, the American State Department. It's such a comfortable little narrative. And it is no different. It's a dual narrative that exists when Americans also look at the situation in Israel and go, well, they say they're doing this for Jews, right? And think, okay, maybe this has something to do with Judaism. Like they're saying they're doing this for Judaism, right? When in fact, American Jews have very different opinions and a very different relationship with Israel from one another. They are not in agreement with one another on their relationship with Israel and how it must exist or how it should exist. And this is before we even factor in the very desperate and very deliberate social conditioning that exists and how Zionism has basically reformed itself as a new national religion for a lot of Reform Jews in America, okay, in their upbringing, in their development. Having said that, however, we always forget to mention something truly important in this process, which is Christian Zionism. Christian Zionism historically has predated Jewish Zionism. It blows my mind that people just simply don't understand this. Like, it was actually Jews in the UK that openly criticized the Balfour Declaration. Lord Balfour was not exactly a fan of Jews. He was, however, a Christian Zionist. We never consider CUFI, Christians United for Israel, and its importance in this subject. We never consider that there are 10 times more rabid evangelical Christian Zionists in this country than there are Jews in total. Anti-Zionist, Zionists, it doesn't matter. The number of Christian Zionists in this country who believe in a Armageddon theological justification for why Israel must exist in the ways that it does as a ethno-state for the chosen sons of God numbers 10 times more than the number of Jews all Jews in general, anti-Zionist Jews, pro-Zionist Jews, ultra-Zionist Jews alike. Yeah, Zionism started with Balfour, clueless. No. Do you think that I am unfamiliar with the inception of Zionism? Do you think I don't know who Theodor Herzl is? Are you stupid? I'm just saying that Theodor Herzl, despite being secular himself, had to make as many different arguments as he possibly could to justify this to an audience of global Jewish community, to an audience of Jews who did not like the argument at all originally. Edwin Montague was the only Jewish minister at the time who was very critical of the the Balfour Declaration. He barely justified it. He called it straight up settler colonialism. No, that's a justification, chatter. It was a different time. That was him selling it to other colonialists to say, we will aid in your effort of controlling this region. That is a justification. We just look back at it now. That's the reason why the early JNF, like Jewish National Funds and whatnot, were openly considered colonial funds. Like they knew that what they were doing was settler colonialism, and that's how they were trying to present it to non-Jews who were also involved in this process, who also were like, no, this is great. Theodor Herzl originally went to the Ottoman Empire and was like, give me Palestine. The Ottoman Empire was like, no, no thanks. Yeah. Herzl famously rode the Cecil roads. You are being invited to help make history, Herzl rode the roads. It doesn't involve Africa, but a piece of Asia Minor, not Englishmen, but Jews. How then do I happen to turn to you, since this is an out-of-the-way matter for you? How indeed? Because it is something colonial. You, Mr. Rhodes, are a visionary politician or a practical visionary. I want you to put the stamp of your authority on the Zionist plan and to make the following declaration to a few people who swear by you. I, Rhodes, have examined this plan and found it correct and practicable. It is a plan full of culture, excellent for the group of people for whom it is directly designed, and quite good for England, for Greater Britain. This man was only invested in the development of a Jewish ethno-state, okay? Theodor Herzl. And there were, he was far from the most aggressive at the time. I would say Jabotinsky was far worse in his commentary and his rhetoric and his open declarations and allegiances with fascism. But Theodor Herzl, seen as the, godfather of Israel, did not really care. He had one mind. He had one mindset. He would go and make a religious justification to religious Jews. He would go and make a secular justification to secular Jews. He would go and make a colonialist justification to colonialist non-Jews. It didn't matter. Do you understand? It was more so just, I really want this. I really want this bad. But let's get back to Noam Chomsky. Yeah, even a socialist justification. That's the other part. Labor Zionism. Yeah, see? This is what I was talking about. Thank you, Time Without an OO, for coming in hot. I mean, the biggest funds after Weitz's were Weitz's JNF, Jewish National Fund, were literally called PICA and JCA, the Palestine Colonialization Association and the Jewish Colonization Association. It wasn't really hidden. Why wasn't it really hidden? Because back then, this was a way to say, no, this is good. We're doing settler colonialism. They didn't have that same mindset. Funnily enough, PICA was a Rothschild project. Like they didn't look at this term in the same woke ways that we now understand colonialism as a bad thing, okay? It was a good thing being presented. Victims of colonialism were even less, it had even less voice. They barely have a voice now. There was a positive association with the term, not a negative one. Anyway, let's continue.
Helping people are natural instincts, but we're trapped by the Jewish lobby. Well, that's a pretty good reason, I think, why it is accepted. Yeah. The second question is about the thesis. I mean, can it really be that a small ethnic lobby controls U.S. policy? I mean, if anybody believes that thesis, there's a tactical suggestion that follows immediately. Put on your tie and jacket, go to the executive offices of Lockheed Martin, General Electric, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Chase, and explain to them that your interests are being harmed by a little lobby which you can put out of business in 5 minutes. Okay, that's the tactical suggestion that follows. Does anybody pursue it? No, because it's absurd. I mean, the claim, this is actually is an interesting, Mearsheimer and Wald are very good scholars. We're called realist IR scholars. According to realist scholarship, states pursue what is called the national interest, which primarily security. Now it's an anarchic world, and states try to preserve their own security, well-being of their own populations, and the national interest. There's a lot of questions that are open there. First of all, what is the national interest? I mean, is the national interest of the CEO of General Electric the same as the interest of the janitor who cleans his floors? No, their interests are quite different. So what's the national interest?
Where to start?
Well, in practice, it turns out that the interests of state power and concentrated economic power. Take a look at the formation of policy. That's what it defends. Is the national interest in that sense harmed by U.S. policy towards Israel? Well, pretty hard to argue that.
This is why I always say, and I said this in my Oxford speech as well, saying Israel has anything to do with Judaism is like saying ISIS has anything to do with Islam. Okay? ISIS is true Islam, Israel is true Judaism. These are both silly attitudes. These are wrong. Okay? At its base, it's just a fundamentally incorrect position. And it also revolves around the notion that these people have a monolithic understanding and a monolithic approach. Okay, that all Jews believe this or all Muslims believe this. It's wrong. And another thing that I regularly mention that I brought up in my Oxford speech as well, which is that if all Americans tomorrow became card-carrying anti-Zionists, every single American Jew tomorrow became a card-carrying anti-Zionist, it would not change America's dynamic with Israel even a little bit. Okay? It would probably make way for even more support and even more protests in general. But I promise you, the American state would still support Israel. Okay? And there is truth to this reality, as I've often talked about as well. J Street did a poll on American Jews, finding that 70% of American Jews believe in refusing offensive weapons to Israel, denying weapon shipments to Israel in an effort to get them to agree to the ceasefire conditions. 70%. Has that changed Biden's calculation? Since that poll came out, Biden gave another $600 million to Israel. He hugged and kissed Israel Herzog, the president of Israel. Or is his name Israel Herzog? Sorry. Is it, what was it? It is, right? Or I might fuck up his name. I forget. What's the name of the president of Israel? Isaac Herzog, not Israel Herzog. Sorry. Thank you. He hugged and kissed him. Okay. Tim Apple, a Tim Apple moment. And, this is important for people to comprehend, I think. At its most basic, simple truth, it's just a falsehood. And I'm never going to tell you a lie. I'm never going to tell you something I don't believe. It's not like, I'm secretly ashamed of the real truths about anti-Semitism. That's like what anti-Semites always act like. The criticism of Israel must be anti-Semitic in nature. It has to be, right? And that people who criticize Israel are actually secretly anti-Semitic themselves, but are hiding the truth because they're scared, because they don't want people to see the reality. They they don't want to get canceled or whatever, right? And that's just not the truth. I just don't believe it. And I think it's ridiculous, I think it's ridiculous. The Bassem Yousef clip was clip chimped if you were interested. Yeah, well, I'll look more into it.
You have a responsibility to make a distinction between your opposition to that state and your opposition to that individual person, just like you have a responsibility, no matter how you feel about the People's Republic of China, not to take out your animosity towards the People's Republic of China on a Chinese-American person. But the problem, it seems to me, that we have in fighting against people who conflate Israel and Jews, and therefore take out their anger against Israel on Jews is that we're trying to ask them to make a distinction between Israel as a state and Jews as a group of people. But the organized American Jewish community is not making that distinction ourselves so often, right? So you find that the Jewish organizations are often saying something along the lines of that being a Zionist or supporting Israel is inherent in being Jewish, right? First of all, just that statement really doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. And not only does it not make sense, this is Peter Beinart, by the way, who also had his own very public evolution in broad daylight, going from a liberal Zionist to an anti-Zionist over the years. And I think he's a very valuable voice in this. But he's now going to basically spell out exactly what I've been saying over and over again, that Israel associating itself with Judaism and using it cynically as a fucking shield whenever there's like worthy criticism against Israel is unironically making people more anti-Semitic. I guess, like, as a Muslim living in the United States of America whose name is Hasan, regardless of how white I am, I recognize how dangerous of a prospect this is because of the ways that the understanding of Islam has been bastardized. The understanding of Islam has been falsely presented as ISIS. All Muslims are jihadists. All Muslims are religious fundamentalists. Like, I know what that's like when an entire group of people are cast with this violent brush. So seeing Israel do it to itself is strange. And I think it's short-sighted. I think Israel doing this as a cynical mechanism, like a cynical shield to deploy, is so short-sighted because this dangerous conflation causes people to be more anti-Semitic. What are these guys? What is the goal here? Like, you keep spamming the silly ass Israeli flag in the chat. Like, what? Okay, sick. Is it to say like, oh, Hasan is banning the Israeli flag in his chat in a conversation about how dangerous it is to conflate anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, or how dangerous it is to conflate Israel's actions with Judaism? Is that what it is? Oh, you got it, man. And then you got banned. Oh, how anti-Semitic is Hasan's chat? Oh my God, so brave.
Right? Because Judaism existed for a long time before Zionism existed, and there have always been significant numbers of Jews, right, for a variety of reasons, who opposed political Zionism in the state of Israel, right? So, but it's also just very dangerous because you are making exactly the conflation, right, that we want people who oppose Israel and Zionism not to make, right? And so when the chief rabbi of Israel, of the United Kingdom, said a few years ago, he said that Zionism leaps from every page of the Siddur, of the Jewish prayer book, right? Again, it's a very strange statement given that we've had prayer books since long, long before, Herzl and Pinsker came along in the late 19th century. But then why shouldn't someone write Free Palestine on a Jewish prayer book? You've basically just said it's the equivalent of a political pamphlet for the state of Israel, right? And that's a very, very dangerous thing to do.
Yeah. Like utilizing synagogues and Jewish community centers at the behest of the Zionist project, where you sell West Bank properties that the Israeli state has illegally occupied after purging the indigenous population from those homes, and then utilizing the mechanisms, the dangerous and violent mechanisms of the state to overtake those and the ancestral homelands of the indigenous Palestinian population, and then selling those houses illegally in direct contravention with international law and the local laws of whichever state that they're doing this in, is a very, very dangerous prospect. You are smearing Western Jews with this fascist brush. Scary stuff. It's ridiculous. Using places of faith like that is so gross. So gross. So you want us to believe that a Jewish ethno-state has nothing to do with Judaism and believe that a shadowy rich cult controls everything because they believe Armageddon will happen soon? First of all, if you think that America's allegiances with Israel are simply because of the right-wing, reactionary, evangelical Christian Zionist movement in this country, you are delusional. That is also immaterial. Okay, that is anti-materialist thinking. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm simply stating is, I don't know where you live, chatter. Perhaps you live in the United States of America. Another thing that I mentioned in my Cambridge and Oxford Union speeches was, we have demographic concerns too. here in the United States of America. Some politicians very openly mention the demographic concerns that we have. It's called Christian nationalism, and it's been growing, especially in recent years. Now, as a United States of America citizen, whether you are of the Christian faith or not, if you understand that as psychotic fascist politicians here, why can you not make this distinction for Jews, both in Israel and also all around the world? That's it. Nazism is not inherent to the German mentality. Zionism is not inherent. You're not born a Zionist. It's learned behavior, like fascist ideologies of every other sort. That is my analysis on the situation. Okay? You are programmed into believing this. It's learned behavior, just like every other bigotry. You've literally said America supports Israel because the evangelicals do? No, you misunderstood what I said. I said America supports Israel because it is in our material interests. It is in the interests of American capitalists to have a unsinkable aircraft carrier in a resource-rich region, okay? That is the reason. I'm simply stating that there are more Christian Zionists in this country than there are Jews overall. So even if all Jews in the United States of America were anti-Zionist, our analysis, the American government's analysis wouldn't change. Even if everyone was anti-Zionist, the analysis would not change. But outside of that, the reason why I talk about the evangelical Christian Zionism movement in this country is because they have genuine outsized political power, so much so that they can make the Republican Party, by way of the Federalist Society, undermine the democratic wishes of Americans. We saw this with abortion. So I think it's a way to shift the responsibility away. Whenever people say, nah, it's Jews, it's the Jews, over and over again. It's not to say, no, it's not the Jews, it's actually right-wing evangelical Christians. That would also be anti-materialist thinking. I do not agree with that at all. But on top of the notion, I'm saying it's doubly wrong to just assume that this is a Jewish thing. Okay? And when you start thinking like that, in my opinion, you are serving a dual purpose. On the one hand, you're reaffirming the position that the Israeli government wants. The Israeli government wants every single person to think Israel is a Jewish project. It's a Jewish ethno-state. It must exist. And the other purpose you serve is to reinstill the nascent, underlying, unexamined anti-Semitism that already exists. Zionists in Israel want this. That's precisely the reason why Benjamin Netanyahu will regularly collaborate with openly anti-Semitic people, openly anti-Semitic governors, including but not limited to the guy in Romania that's pro-Putin, and also literally a defender of the people that carried out the Holocaust. Why did Benjamin Netanyahu have a wonderful conversation with him in the first round of the elections? I'll tell you why. Just like the same in Hungary, where Benjamin Netanyahu linked up with Viktor Orban's anti-Semitic propaganda minister. Okay, his campaign, I think it was his campaign manager. Viktor Orban ran on anti-Semitic memes, okay, in Hungary. Why, one must ask, why is Benjamin Netanyahu so comfortable with anti-Semitic fascists? Well, one, because he's a fascist and also anti-Semitic. But two, anti-Semitism in the West benefits Israel. Anti-Semitism growing in the West plays into the interests of Israel. If Jews feel less safe in the West, then they'll want to defend Israel's ethno-state project, touching on the centuries of domination, pogroms, and the Holocaust, and the real pain that exists in Jewish history, and packaging that up again and saying, see, it's growing. It's growing in the West. That's why you have to either support Israel and fight at the behest of Israel and engage in propaganda war if you're not going to actually come to Israel and live there. But ultimately, you have to live in Israel. This is another reason why I always say the greatest threat to Israel is not Iran. It's not the mullahs. It's not the Ayatollah. It's not Hezbollah. It's not the Ansar Allah movement. The greatest threat to Israel is Sherman Oaks. The greatest threat to Israel is Boca Raton. The greatest threat to Israel is Brooklyn, New York. Because if people do not feel insecure living in the Western world, and they shouldn't, our Jewish brothers and sisters should not feel insecure living in the United States of America. Okay? Lamau, come on, man. It's 100% true. This is 100% true. This is why I despise when Joe Biden said that no Jew would be safe in the United States of America or anywhere around the world if Israel didn't exist. To me, that's an abdication of your responsibility as the president of the United States of America, a country that has almost the same number of Jews, Jewish Americans, living in it as Israel. It's a ridiculous statement to say. The f*** do you mean no Jew would be safe? Is that a threat? What are you talking about? It's a lie. It's a silly lie. It's a silly lie that serves the propaganda purposes of the state of Israel, beefing up the state of Israel. How can you separate Israel from Judaism as a Palestinian? All I see is Jewish ethno-state promoting Israel as the safest place for Jews, ethnically cleansing people to bring in Jewish settlers, annexing Jerusalem and West Bank to control the alleged Jewish temple, a government using the Torah to justify their genocide. How can anyone separate that from one another? Yes. I mean, I understand why Palestinians and people that live in the region develop this attitude. Norm Finkelstein talked about this with the Ansar Allah movement. The Ansar Allah movement on its banner has a statement that says, curse the Jews. Okay? It's completely unacceptable. It's ridiculous. Right? It's violent. Violently anti-Semitic. But what does Norm say? In the eyes of everyone in the region, since 1948, this has always been, like, Jewishness has always been falsely associated with the state of Israel. And people understandably see it as a violent, expansionist, settler colonial state. So that is the association, the false association that they make. Just because victims, like the Palestinians, make that said false association doesn't mean it is correct. That's it. It's that simple. If you're Palestinian, especially if you're of a Muslim background, you hear these false associations made about Muslims in the Western world with ISIS. Do you agree with those false associations? The only difference in this situation is that anti-Semitism is institutionally protected, right? People, it's not considered appropriate institutionally, right? Whereas Islamophobia serves the interests of the American State Department and the war on terror. So on the one hand, both are false smears, but one actually is seen as a weapon to wield against the entire Muslim population around the globe. The other is seen as a shield to defend the interests of the Israeli state. But they're still untrue. Do you see what I'm saying? The only difference, however, is that both of these are real bigotries. One is seen as a bigotry, the other one is not. Unfortunate reality is that many people do not see Islamophobia as a real bigotry. They see it as like real criticisms of what they perceive is the entirety of the ummah. Okay? Are you going to cover the Oxford Union Address other than yours? I saw a couple really good ones on the topic. Yeah. Maybe. Anyway.